It all starts with a little boy holding a stick and shouting that he's a wizard. He then plays with a friend, and the girl pretends to be a magical beast for him to defeat. Wielding his makeshift staff, the young boy prepares for his big attack. Without a second thought, the boy bunks his friend on the head with the stick. She then complains about being hit for real, but the boy says wizards are supposed to hit beasts. At that, the girl says she wants to be a wizard too, but he refuses, while an old man watches them. Soon, the old man, named Labus, comments on how the children are full of energy that morning. Hearing this, the two approach him and ask how they can become wizards, but the elder says it's not that easy. He explains that mages are the pinnacle of humanity and rule society with inherited powers. Thus, the old man says that unfortunately, they can't become mages, and a young man questions him for saying that. The young man then asks if a rumor he heard is true, and the elder looks at him curiously. At that moment, the man asks if it's true that a magical beast has appeared in the region. With a serious expression, old Labus confirms the rumor, leaving the other villagers frightened. The old man says that a giant leopard covered in shadows was found at the village entrance. But a woman calms her daughter, saying the village chief went to the city to get a mage. With that, the other villagers are relieved, believing the beast will be subdued. The mother then warns her daughter not to go into the forest for now to ensure her safety. The elder also warns everyone, as it's nearly impossible to handle a beast without a mage. At that, the same young man from before asks if everyone in the village knows the news, and the old man confirms. Then the young man asks about that boy, but the old man doesn't seem to know who he's talking about. The young man then says he's referring to the boy from Hizarl Heel. The scene cuts to a shepherd named Turin lying in the grass. He has a bored expression while resting with his sheep. Lying there, the young man complains that his life is very dull and uninteresting. The young man is tired of seeing the same landscape every single day, and of living the same routine over and over without anything new happening. The shepherd thinks that if this continues, he'll even forget how to speak. Suddenly, a voice calls him a pathetic kid, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was old Labus, complaining that the shepherd was already slacking off. But the young man just complains that the old man's shadow is disturbing his rest. The old man calls him rude and asks if he still holds a grudge from the past. The young man then remembers that the elder tried to take his flock when his mother passed away. Because of that, he's not generous enough to share his inheritance with the village. Turan tells the old man to get straight to the point, and the man gets annoyed by the boy's boldness. But the shepherd just stares back at him with a serious and defiant expression. At that, the elder reveals that a magical beast has appeared, and the young man stands up, surprised. The elder explains that it's a leopard the size of a house, and he came to warn him right away. Labus is shocked because the shepherd doesn't seem the least bit scared by the news. He doesn't understand the young man's courage, but warns him to be careful anyway. The old man says he went there because he was worried, but the shepherd calls him dishonest. The shepherd accuses him of only being worried about the sheep and not him, which makes the old man furious. Then the young man tells the old man to leave if he's done talking. He even insults him, saying his breath is so bad his nose is going to rot. Angrily, the old man leaves, while the protagonist pets one of his sheep. Alone, the young shepherd starts thinking about the magical beast that has appeared. It's explained that magical beasts are like the animal version of mages, as they also use mana. He gets excited at the idea of a mage coming to the village, as he'll finally see one in person. But he thinks the mage won't be a big deal since he was called by the chief of a rural village. Even so, he's still curious to see one and wonders how strong the mage will be. Suddenly, the shepherd starts to smell something strange in the air that catches his attention. Startled, the young man quickly realizes what that smell is. Looking at the sky, he concludes that the scent drifting in his blood. At dusk, the young man decides to follow the scent through the forest to see what happened. He walks carefully along the dirt path, following the trail. The shepherd is sure he's heading in the right direction as he moves through the woods. The smell gets stronger and stronger as he gets closer to the location. At that moment, the young man stops walking as he spots something shocking ahead. He finds Labus and other villagers who were viciously attacked. The young man laments as he didn't expect the source of the smell to be Labus himself. Analyzing the scene, the shepherd realizes that a common wild animal wouldn't cause that much damage. He concludes that this could only be the work of a magical beast, not just any animal. Suddenly, the shepherd hears a strange noise and goes on high alert. Then a giant paw with sharp claws slowly emerges from the shadows. It was a huge, dark creature with a very frightening appearance. The magical beast then reveals itself completely in front of the young shepherd. At this moment, the scene cuts to the little boy from before asking about the strength of these beasts. His father explains that ordinary adults wouldn't stand a chance against one of them. Worried by what he heard, the boy asks what will happen to their village. But his father calms him down and says the village chief went to get a mage to handle the situation. Hearing this, the boy asks fearfully if the mage will be able to defeat the monster. The man confirms, saying that mages are incredible people born with the power of magic. He adds that they can vanquish a magical beast with a single word. Back in the present, the shepherd faces the creature without showing a single trace of fear. Then he simply says the word, "fall," and the beast is struck by something invisible. The monster seems confused and doesn't understand what just happened to its body. But the young man's body begins to glow with an intense red aura of power. He scratches his head and realizes his first plan didn't quite work out. Seeing that nothing happened, the beast roars and charges furiously toward the shepherd. Unfazed, the protagonist just shouts for the enormous creature to stop, and in the blink of an eye, the monster's body is completely sliced by a mysterious power. The young man realizes he can't stop the attack, even if he wants to, and is surprised by this. The creature glows brightly and begins to regenerate in front of him as if nothing happened. With a fierce roar, the monster shows that it is far from being defeated. Without wasting time, the beast charges, and the shepherd has to back away to avoid being hit. Seeing that his first plan failed, he decides to change his strategy for the fight. Then the young man picks up a small stone from the ground and holds it firmly in his hand. He says that a shepherd should act like one and readies his slingshot for the fight. At that moment, the huge monster runs towards him for another attack. The young man then uses his magic on the stone, ordering it to become stronger. With his enchanted projectile, he spins the slingshot and prepares to fire. His eyes glow with a golden light as he focuses completely on the target. The shepherd also orders the stone to become faster and spins the slingshot with more force. He plants his feet firmly on the ground and uses his entire body to power the throw. Finally, the young man gives the final command for the stone to pierce his enemy. The small stone is shot at an incredible speed, glowing with a blue energy. The magical projectile flies in a straight line toward the monster's head. With no chance to dodge, the creature is hit squarely by the precise attack. On impact, a large red mist spreads through the forest air. The stone passes through the beast's head without any difficulty and continues on its path. With its head pierced, the enormous creature finally falls to the ground, defeated. The scene rewinds a bit, showing the beast falling toward the shepherd for the final attack. But with a confident smile, the young man already had his aim set for the counter attack. And so, the small stone flies towards the enormous creature lying on the ground. The target was its head, and the projectile hits it dead on, causing major damage. Hitting the monster, the object passes through with ease and continues its trajectory. The protagonist stands still as the beast's lifeless body falls behind him. He then comments that it was the first time he used this power on a magical beast. The young man wonders what to do with the body and thinks about tossing it off a cliff. Angrily, he complains that in the end, he just did the villagers a favor. Then a close-up on his eye reveals the truth, as he is actually a mage. A memory begins, and the young man explains that he discovered his ability 8 years ago. When he was 10 years old, he used his powers to make objects float around the house. Excited, the boy would call his mother to show her that the firewood was flying, but his mother would appear with a serious expression, not at all happy with the situation. He would also tell her he could create fire and wind, and he remembers that day clearly. His mother would then yell at him angrily to stop, and it was the only time she ever got mad. Confused, young Turin didn't understand her reaction as she picked up the firewood. The woman knelt in front of him and said they needed to talk for a bit. She then asked if he wanted to live with her for a long time, and he confirmed, and so his mother made him promise to never use that power again. The woman also forbids him from using his power in front of other people. Not understanding, the boy asks why, and she reminds him of the story about nobles and knights. With a serious look, the young man says he remembers what she told him well. She explains that nobles are descendants of lords who saved humanity, and knights are born from them. The mother praises her son for having a good memory for the stories she tells. That's why nobles and knights are treated differently, even among mages. She then reveals that the young man's power was inherited from his father, who was a knight. With that, the woman warns him to never let anyone find out that he is a mage. With a smile, she asks her son to promise that he will keep this secret. Back in the present, the shepherd recounts that 8 years have passed, and he still keeps his promise. Looking out the window, he affirms that this promise will never be broken. The protagonist thinks that he has no intention of revealing his powers to anyone, and he also doesn't plan to come down from the mountain or abandon his isolated life. Suddenly, the young man hears a strange noise coming from outside his house. Someone starts banging on his door and shouting his name, telling him to come out. Confused, the shepherd opens the door to see what's going on. Outside, a group of villagers glares at him with angry expressions. With a yawn, the protagonist asks what they want with him. At that, one of the men accuses him of ending Labus's life. Another villager grabs him forcefully and calls him a shameless kid. The man shouts furiously, accusing the young man of using the poor old man as bait to attract the monster. Despite the tense atmosphere, the shepherd remains calm as he feels the firm grip on his clothes. With that, the young man realizes the group is just trying to find someone to blame for this whole mess. He understands that blaming him is the easiest way out for these cowards who were hiding. Smiling, the hero comments that they just want to get rid of the responsibility before someone points at them. At this, the man gets really angry and lunges at him, screaming the protagonist's name with all his hatred. But with a quick move, the boy dodges the punch without any effort. While dodging, the young man thinks that magic can be very useful for dealing with annoying situations. Then the young man lands a clean hit on the attacker, showing he's not an easy person to beat. At this moment, he reflects that if you wish for something strongly, it becomes real in exchange for mana. With a serious look, the young man just whispers a simple command, telling his opponent to fall to the ground. The attacker trips on his own and falls face first into the grass, not understanding what happened. Even though he's surrounded, the shepherd walks calmly as the others try to hit him without success. He tries to act discreetly so as not to draw unwanted attention with his hidden powers. With that, the young man uses a wooden stick to defend himself, forcefully hitting anyone who gets close. Moving with agility, the hero dominates the fight and takes down another villager with a swift blow. He continues to hand out beatings to the rude neighbors who dared to trespass on his property. Suddenly, the handles of their tools break in mid-air after clashing with the protagonist. The result is the whole group thrown onto the lawn. While the young man remembers, he's been living like this for 8 years. Finally, the mage observes the defeated men and states that he has spent all this time hiding his secret. The young man suggests they use all that energy to organize Labus's funeral. At that, a group of women appears, and he asks if they also came to fight, but they say no. One of them says they just wanted to see him, leaving the shepherd silent for a moment. Then he tells them to take the idiots away and goes back into his house. Alone, the young man thinks that going to the village will be a mess, and they'll use this to negotiate prices. But he doesn't care and decides that if they try anything, he can just beat them up again. He believes the thrashing was good enough, that they won't come back for a while. Suddenly, someone knocks on his door, and the shepherd thinks they've really lost their minds. The knock is loud and firm, showing that whoever is outside isn't there to play. Angrily, the young man opens the door, shouting and asking who wants to get hurt. In front of him stands an unknown man with a beard and traveler's clothes. Staring at him, the stranger apologizes and asks if he can stay there for a while, as he is traveling. The protagonist is surprised, and the word, traveling, stays in his mind for a moment. The man apologizes for his tone, as he just dealt with some unpleasant people. The young man thinks that his mother taught him to be polite, but he never uses that tone with the villagers. He finds the whole situation strange and notices the man is carrying a sword. With a smile, the young man greets him, finding it curious to see a swordsman in this rural area. He then lets out a sigh as he analyzes the unexpected visitor at his door. The shepherd says that if the man is looking for an inn, he's in the wrong place. The scene cuts to a table full of food, indicating that he invited him in to eat. The host invites the stranger to come in and says he doesn't have much to offer, but the traveler is surprised by the food, and even more so to learn the young man has never seen an outsider. At that, the young man explains that he was born and raised there, and has thus never left the hill. The swordsman watches him attentively while drinking from a wooden mug. On the other side of the table, the shepherd also enjoys his drink calmly. Suddenly, the visitor compliments the young man on his posture and manners. He comments that for someone who has always been a shepherd, his manners are very good. The protagonist says it was his mother who taught him, but she passed away a few years ago. Hearing this, the man says she raised an excellent young man, and is now resting in a good place. The young man thanks him and says he just lives the way his mother taught him. Then the young man asks what brought him to such a remote place, and he reveals he received a request. The request was to deal with a leopard-type magical beast that appeared in the region, and they were looking for someone who could defeat the creature. At that, the shepherd realizes he is the mage the village chief went to get, and the man confirms it. Now the mage asks if he can ask a question, and the young man allows him to proceed. He says he can feel the beast's aura nearby, but the monster is nowhere to be found, and the strangest thing of all is the shepherd's attitude, which makes him suspicious. The village chief warned him about the danger, but the young man is completely calm. He adds that if the creature attacks humans, the young man would be the first target. Finally, the mage looks him in the eyes and asks directly if he isn't afraid. A memory comes back, and the young man recalls his mother asking who he really was. Young Turan then questions why he can't tell anyone he's a mage. His mother explains that knights are like the dogs that shepherds raise for the flock. They can be treated like family, but if necessary, they are sold or sacrificed at any moment. The woman then says she doesn't want that future for her son and asks him to keep living with her. And so, she makes him promise that he will never forget that important warning. The woman warns him that if another mage finds out, they will be separated, and he will be turned into a tool. With that, she says that to keep his identity secret, he might even have to silence someone for good. Back in the present, the shepherd realizes that the moment his mother feared so much has finally arrived. The visitor insists on the question, and the young man's eyes glow with a golden light of power. Not understanding the reaction, the swordsman stays quiet for a moment, observing him in silence. But the mage suddenly smiles and says that with that face, the young man ruined his joke. The protagonist is confused and wonders what kind of joke that was. He apologizes and says he doesn't have much of a sense of humor, but the man tells him not to worry. The mage says the surprise was normal, since it was his first time hearing a mage's joke. At that moment, the visitor realizes they haven't even introduced themselves and extends his hand. With a smile, he says it's a pleasure to meet him and expects a handshake. The young man introduces himself as Turan, an 18-year-old shepherd, and shakes the man's hand. The two formally greet each other for the first time since the visitor arrived. The mage says he turned 75, and the shepherd comments that he doesn't look that old. The visitor explains that mages age slowly, and the young man asks how he became a wanderer. He says he served House Arabian for 60 years, and now just wanted to travel in his final days. With a smile, the mage finds the idea quite romantic and prepares to share something with the young man. The shepherd smiles back, showing curiosity in what the older man has to say. At that, the visitor also gives a big smile, creating a very friendly atmosphere between them. They continue their conversation, and the young man thinks he never imagined this would be so much fun. Time flies by, and when they notice, the day is almost dawning outside. Surprised, the mage says he didn't even notice the night pass, and says it's time for him to leave. He then leaves silver coins on the table as payment, and explains that they are the purest kind. The young man accepts and wishes him luck on the hunt, but the man tells him not to act like it's a farewell. The traveler even jokes that he might come back for a free meal sometime. The next day, the shepherd takes his sheep to graze on the hill as usual. The sheep graze peacefully on the grass, enjoying the sunny day in the field. With a smile on his face, the young man then gives an order for the entire flock to gather. Upon hearing the call, one of the sheep stops eating and immediately looks in its owner's direction. Obediently, the whole flock gathers around the young shepherd in the middle of the pasture. He reflects that it was the first time he had met another mage, and can't even remember the last time he talked so much. Petting a sheep, he remembers the calmness and joy in that man's voice. The young man concludes that of all the adults he's met, the mage was a truly good person. Alone with his flock, he thinks that he always saw knights as hunting dogs for nobles. The shepherd wonders how the hunt went, since there are no more magical beasts on his Errol Hill. Meanwhile, the mage walks through the forest and realizes there really are no more beasts around. He finds the situation very strange, and something seems off about the whole story. The visitor sees signs of a battle, but can't sense any trace of the creature's aura. He then looks at a tree and wonders if the magical beast was already hunted by someone else. The man wonders who could have taken down the monster, and if the chief called another mage besides him. But either way, the swordsman is relieved, because the important thing is that the beast was defeated. Suddenly, the mage feels something strange, and his expression of relief changes completely. Startled, the man turns around quickly as he senses a malevolent presence approaching. At that moment, a monstrous paw with gigantic claws emerges from the shadows in front of him. The creature reveals itself, and it's a bizarre, decaying version of the beast that attacked the village. He then realizes that it's a corpse puppet, a marionette made from the monster's body. Shocked, the man wonders who in the world would do something so terrible. With no time to think, the enormous creature lunges and tries to crush him with its shadowy claw. With a quick move, the mage dodges, and the monster's blow creates a crater in the ground. He explains that this happens if the mana isn't absorbed, and no mage would be so ignorant. Then, the visitor flies up and attacks the corpse puppet with a powerful blast of energy. He's sure it was a mage who took down the beast, but he doesn't understand why they would leave it like this. He dismisses the idea of a rookie knight, as someone inexperienced couldn't take down this beast. Creating a fireball, he wonders if the person who did this had some other objective. Regardless, he needs to put an end to this, and prepares to attack with everything he's got. The man then fires a powerful energy blast at the shadowy creature, but to his surprise, the corpse puppet manages to nullify his magical power. Shocked, the mage realizes that this beast's mana is much stronger than his own. Suddenly, the creature vanishes into the forest, leaving him completely confused. He understands that the monster intends to use magic to counter-attack and searches for it in the woods. At that moment, the enemy's shadow stealthily appears right behind the poor mage. The creature then emerges from the shadows and attacks him with a tail full of spikes. With no time to react, the man is hit dead on and ends up gravely injured, with his arm wounded. He realizes this isn't something a simple knight could handle. The force of the impact throws him far, making him roll across the forest grass. Lying on the ground, he thinks he never imagined encountering a monster of this level around here. Seeing the creature approach, the mage wonders if this will be his end, but with a determined smile, the old swordsman decides he's not going to give up. He won't go down without a fight and promises to take the creature with him if he has to. Then the man focuses all his mana into his hand for one last desperate attack. With that, the creature moves in for the final blow, ready to end the fight. The mage concentrates and waits for the right moment to use his power with full force. Without a second thought, he leaps and flies towards the monster for a counterattack. Suddenly, a small blue light appears in the middle of the forest, catching everyone's attention. Suddenly, an intense blue light cuts through the air and strikes the creature that was about to finish off the poor old man. At this, the traveler is completely shocked to see that the attack came from an unexpected direction, saving his life at the last second. Under the impact of the mysterious blow, the monster is thrown to the ground and finally stops moving in the middle of the woods. Still confused, the old man looks up and hears a familiar voice asking if he's okay after the whole ordeal. He realizes the savior was none other than the young shepherd, who now looks at him with a calm and peaceful expression. Walking slowly along the path, the protagonist approaches the visitor as the tense atmosphere slowly begins to fade. At that, the old swordsman's eyes widen as he realizes the truth and asks if the young man is actually a very powerful mage. Though surprised, the veteran questions why the hero hid his identity during the whole time they spent talking at his house. Then the man wants to know why the boy decided to help, since he could have just run away without looking back. The young man gives a small smile and begins to explain his reasons in a very simple and direct way to his new friend. At this moment, the scene changes to a memory where a dog is resting on the wooden floor of the protagonist's home. Sitting at the table, the two talk about life, while the pet rests peacefully near their feet. With that, the young man comments that with the visitor's skills, he could earn a lot more money working elsewhere. Curious, the hero asks what is so sad about the villagers' lives for the elder to feel so much pity for them. With a sigh, the veteran explains that those people live isolated and without any protection against the dangers of this cruel world. Hearing this, the young shepherd reflects on how all mages inherit the power of the gods and must follow their own destiny. Then the old man smiles and says he feels proud to protect the helpless commoners, but admits that not all of his colleagues think the same way. With that, the protagonist shows that he understood the lesson, and a smile of satisfaction appears on his face during the dialogue. He states that every person in this giant world has their own thoughts and a unique way of living their life. At that moment, the force of the impact creates a powerful shockwave that sweeps through the entire forest, ending the battle against evil for good. Running through the forest, the mage says they need to flee because the creature is on another level. He explains that only a noble could defeat it, and tells the young man to warn the village chief. Alone, the swordsman prepares to fight the monster and buy time for the escape. But the veteran admits he was just talking big and doesn't know how long he'll last. Then, the shepherd interrupts him and tells him not to worry, because everything is fine. The young man says that if the last attack worked, they'll be okay, and a stone glows. At this, the swordsman is shocked and asks if the young man wasn't even using his full strength. The veteran knight Korn then realizes that this was no chance encounter. With that, several stones begin to float in the air with an intense blue energy. The protagonist unleashes his power, and it becomes clear that he is not a simple runaway knight. With a smile, the young man reveals that he was also curious to test his own limits. Surrounded by floating rocks, the young mage prepares to face the enormous shadowy creature. With a confident smile, the young man reveals that he was also curious about his own limits. But the older knight shouts that he won't allow it because the opponent is too strong. He says they need to join forces, but the monster is already charging to attack the protagonist. Without hesitation, the shepherd fires a powerful beam of blue energy that cuts through the air. The veteran realizes he could barely react and would only get in the way of the fight now. So, he understands he's of no use at the moment and lowers his glowing hand. The mage decides his duty now is to help that young man's talent flourish. Just then, the hero unleashes an overwhelming blast of mana that devastates part of the forest. Even so, the young man grumbles in irritation because his attack didn't have the expected effect. Then he tries a kick, but his lead passes right through the monster's body without causing any harm. The swordsman desperately yells that you can't injure a phantom with physical blows. Seeing the creature advance, the shepherd asks how he can defeat it then. The older man replies that he needs to use fire, and the boy holds out his hand, and he adds that the young man can also use the power of lightning to win. With that, a flame hits the monster, but the attack seems to have no effect on it. The protagonist complains that it's not working, but the old man says that's not the point. The mage explains that to use power on another living being, you need to establish a cause. At that moment, the veteran is shocked as he has a sudden revelation about the young man. He understands that Turan has never absorbed mana, and that's why he let the beast become a phantom. The older mage is shocked to see that the young man is already strong even without training. With that, he yells for the young man to create the fire and then shoot it at the creature. He explains that creating fire is easy, but controlling it requires a lot of training and dedication. But to his surprise, the young man manages to do it instantly without any difficulty. Without wasting time, the protagonist stomps hard on the ground and prepares for the attack. Then he launches the fireball with all his might toward the shadowy monster. The attack hits the creature's eye dead on, causing a huge explosion of flames. With the impact, the phantom's body begins to be completely consumed by the fire. Just then, the veteran yells for him to stay focused and keep injecting mana into the attack. He warns that the young man needs to burn everything about the phantom to defeat it for good. With a determined look, the hero focuses all his power on the flames to finish it. That way, the monster is completely taken out by a whirlwind of intense fire. With the battle over, the veteran swordsman finally celebrates their victory. He comments that that was an absurdly strong, high-level phantom, and even so, the young shepherd managed to defeat the creature all by himself. The young man then asks if it's really all over, and the mage is impressed by his power. The knight warns that he needs to absorb the mana if he doesn't want to encounter another phantom. The young man asks how to do that, and the veteran tells him to imagine he's draining something. Following the advice, the protagonist closes his eyes and concentrates to absorb the mana. With that, a green energy starts to flow from the creature's remains toward the young man. With that, the green mana is completely absorbed by the protagonist's hand as he concentrates. His eyes glow intensely with the same color as the energy that just entered his body. The mana then flows throughout his system, revealing his power channels for the first time. The veteran knight is shocked by the scene and can't believe what he's seeing. He says the young man will feel an incredible sensation, but the boy can hardly believe the feeling he's experiencing. With that, the man asks if it was his first time absorbing mana, and the shepherd confirms. The swordsman explains that mana grows slowly, and the best way to evolve is by absorbing it from others. But since this was the young man's first time, it means his potential is on another level. Thus, he concludes that the young shepherd is someone very special, and the hero gets tense. The mage calls the boy's name to get his attention and break the awkward silence. He bows and apologizes, asking which noble house the young man belongs to. The shepherd then calls him by name, surprising the veteran knight, who stares at him. He tells the man to clean his wound first, and the mage finally notices his injured arm. Back at the cabin, the swordsman appears with his arm properly bandaged and clean. Sitting at the table, the man asks for forgiveness for his rudeness and for making the young man fight. But the protagonist says he's no one important, just a shepherd who doesn't know his father. He asks the mage to stop, and the man agrees, seeing his serious expression. Then the veteran asks why such a powerful mage decided to become a shepherd. The young man explains it was a request from his mother before she passed away a few years ago. He says his mother warned him that if the nobles found him, he would become a disposable tool. The veteran states that the young man's mother was very wise, and the boy is confused by this unexpected comment. He continues, saying the woman wasn't entirely wrong, and the shepherd thinks she was just overprotective. The man explains that the great power of mages always brings conflict, and mentions a war from 20 years ago between noble houses. At that moment, the battle between the Arabian and Zahar houses is shown, where unfortunately thousands of people lost their lives. Of the 3,000 knights who served the House of Arabian, more than 900 ended up perishing during the intense clashes. But the man sadly recounts that all his friends and acquaintances were part of that 1/3 who didn't survive. He remembers his friends, and even his family who were eliminated by the enemy, leaving only the veteran as a survivor. With that, the wanderer states that a warrior's life can vanish much faster than that of a simple commoner. But he points out that the young man's mother was wrong about his talent, and the hero wonders about that. The visitor admits to being a skilled swordsman, but acknowledges that the young man defeated the phantom with startling ease. He states that the shepherd's potential is of a noble level, and is likely among the highest talents of all. The protagonist remains silent, as he reflects on his new friend's words about his future. Then the young man asks if the story about his father being a knight was a lie, and the man explains about rare cases. At that moment, the veteran suggests it would be much better for the young man to leave that hill and see the rest of the world. The shepherd asks why, and the elder replies that humanity still needs more protectors to master the land. But the man quickly apologizes for forgetting that the boy still understands very little about how magic works. He explains that lineage abilities are traits inherited from ancient ancestors, and that's what separates the social classes. With that, the mage asks if there was any spell that seemed too easy or any natural ability that didn't require mana. The hero wonders if it isn't just the power of mana that makes him physically stronger than others. Finally, the young man mentions his keen sense of smell, and the man affirms that a good nose can indeed be a lineage ability. The older mage says that having a skill with throwing weapons is a characteristic of the Arabian house, but it's quite common. With that, the shepherd asks the man to continue the explanation, and he agrees to share more details. But the young man notices the visitor is acting strangely and calls out to him in confusion. Then the swordsman suddenly becomes serious, and the protagonist asks the reason for the change in attitude. With a firm gaze, the elder states that he already knows which noble house the boy's abilities most closely resemble. The young man then asks which family he's talking about, and the veteran maintains his mysterious expression. The mage reveals that the shepherd's abilities belong to one of the great noble houses of the kingdom, and he continues, explaining that the members of this house are known to everyone as the Hunters. At that moment, the man reveals that it's the House of Zahar, the great rival that fought against the House of Arabian. Hearing this, the young man is left completely shocked and speechless by the terrible revelation. The rival family's name echoes in the young shepherd's mind, leaving him completely stunned by the bombshell revelation. He can hardly believe he belongs to the lineage of the powerful House of Zahar, which caused so much pain to his new travel companion. Looking at the veteran, the young man wonders if he carries the same cursed bloodline as those who were the great villains of the last war. At that moment, the hero is confused, not knowing if he should apologize for the actions of distant relatives he never even met personally. Suddenly, the silence is broken when the man calls the protagonist's name in a very calm and comforting tone of voice. Placing a hand on the boy's shoulder, the traveler asks him not to have such a worried expression on his face. He reminds the young man that he didn't take part in any past combat, but even so, the shepherd still feels the weight of guilt. With a gentle smile, the elder says that was a situation for adults, and that feeding hatred would only make the suffering endless. The young man then asks if the man feels any kind of regret, and the veteran asks what he's referring to. Standing in the middle of the pasture, the hero asks if he doesn't regret suggesting the young man leave his life on the mountain. The man explains that if the young man seeks power, he will inevitably end up joining the Zahar family because of his extraordinary talent. Surprised by this, the boy hears that the veteran has complete faith in his good character and the purity in his heart. The man states that he saw the shepherd's kindness when he risked his lifelong secret just to save a stranger. Reflecting on the future, the elder thinks that someone as good as the young man might even be able to prevent terrible new wars from happening again. Then, the man tries to lighten the mood, saying he doesn't need to take everything so seriously since the protagonist hasn't decided his destiny yet. The hero then looks to the horizon and states that his thoughts are now much clearer and more decided than before. With a smile on his face, the protagonist reveals that he has finally made the decision to come down from the hill to explore the rest of the world. The veteran is happy with the brave choice, but warns that the departure shouldn't happen all of a sudden because of his health. At that moment, the shepherd says he'll only leave when his friend's injuries are fully healed, which shows his immense kindness. Looking out the house window, the man concludes that the young man truly has a heart of gold with a bright future waiting for him. The veteran begins his lesson, explaining that to use magic, you need mana, the key to omnipotence. The shepherd reflects on this, but the mage says the power isn't as absolute as the name suggests. With that, the young man asks what the standard is for combining mana with magic, and the man prepares to explain. The swordsman holds up 3 fingers and says the difficulty is defined by lineage, affinity, and causality. He starts by explaining lineage, which is determined by family and applies to most nobles. The mage uses his injury as an example, and the young man confirms he couldn't heal it with magic. But he reveals that the Ravista lineage from the south can heal without training, because it's a family power. Then, the hero asks about affinity, and the veteran says it can be thought of as familiarity. The young man understands and compares it to how he created a fireball, as if he were throwing a stone. The swordsman agrees and says that just creating flames wouldn't have the same speed or firepower. Then he reveals that the last and most important factor is causality, a concept that not even he understands. The man asks what would happen if the young man tried to attack him directly with just mana. He confirms the result would be weak due to a lack of causality and demonstrates on the mug. The water starts to boil, and the mage explains this happens when there's no cause for the result. Seeing the demonstration, the shepherd says he can now understand the concept a little better. The hero explains that to take someone out, he would need to create a cause, like throwing a fireball. With that, the veteran is impressed and even jokes that the young man could have become a scholar, but the young man asks why he needs this with magical beasts if he can control normal animals. The swordsman then reveals that the big difference between them is the mana that the creatures possess. The protagonist understands that a good mage not only uses mana, but also understands its principles. The young man asks if the Zahar lineage also has a special magic, and the man confirms they are good at tracking. With that, the veteran challenges him to try using that ability, and the shepherd accepts the test on the spot. Then he closes his eyes and concentrates, wishing that neither his sound nor his scent could be detected. At that moment, a white smoke starts to come out of his body as he focuses all his energy. The older knight watches him curiously and wonders if the young man's spell really worked. Suddenly, the protagonist disappears from the chair, leaving only a trail of golden light on the floor. Impressed, the swordsman confirms that it worked, because he can no longer see the young man in front of him. The man becomes tense seeing the power of that ability he had feared so much in the past. The room seems empty, as the boy managed to completely erase his presence from the environment. With an intense glow, the mage reappears in the room, showing that the spell was a success. The veteran says that this is a terrifying ability and greatly feared by the knights of Arabian. But he warns that despite being powerful, the invisibility is not invincible and has its weaknesses. The man decides to teach him some training methods, but the young man asks if it isn't dangerous to help an enemy. The knight reminds him that the young man saved his life and even took care of his injuries. With a hand on his chest, the older man reinforces that he completely trusts the protagonist's character. The scene cuts, and the village chief shouts in shock because the shepherd is going to sell the sheep and leave. Equipped for the journey, the hero faces the chief, who complains about him leaving without telling anyone. The mage asks with a smile why he should care about others' opinions regarding his property. He warns that if they don't buy the sheep for a fair price, he will release them all and leave. At this, the man who's beaten before calls out to the village chief, afraid of the shepherd's threat. The village chief grumbles because he knows the young man is someone who keeps his word. With no choice, he hands a bag of coins to the young man, sealing the sale. The elder tells him to do as he pleases, and the two travelers finally leave the village. Then, the shepherd remembers that the village owes the mage compensation and offers to collect it. But the veteran says he won't take anything, because it was the young man who defeated the magical beast. With a smile, the hero agrees, and the two continue their journey along the dirt road. Arriving at the forest, the swordsman says that they need to part ways at that point. He apologizes for not traveling together, and explains that he feels more comfortable alone. The young man says he understands, and thanks him for all the help and lessons he received. With a smile, the knight says goodbye and asks the protagonist to take care on his journey. The young man also smiles, and hopes they can meet again someday in the future. Then the young man watches for a long time as Korn's figure disappears down the trail. Only later did the hero realize why he didn't want the veteran to speak to him formally. It's revealed that he had always wished for a father figure to look up to in his life. The knight had become the role model of the man the protagonist wanted to become one day. The scene then cuts and shows the young man's tracks in the sand of a desolate desert. The strong wind blows through the rocky, cliff-filled landscape of that place. Alone, the hero walks with his hood up through the vastness of that dangerous desert. He shields his eyes from the wind and dust as he continues his solitary journey. Suddenly, the young man spots something in the distance and wonders if they are traveling merchants. The young man spots a group of people in the desert and wonders if they are traveling merchants. Excited by the chance to get help, the young man decides to approach the group. With that, he gets closer and decides to ask for directions to the nearest city. But the group's leader asks who he is to block their path like that. The man informs him that by following the road, he'll reach the city called Murai, and the hero understands. The young man thanks him for the information and prepares to continue his journey through the desert. Suddenly, one of the men stops him from leaving and tells him to wait there for a bit. The man questions if he's just going to leave after getting what he wanted. He then says that if you receive something, you also have to give something in return. At this, the whole group draws their swords and tells the young man to take off his bag immediately. The hero finally realizes he's fallen into a trap and that they are actually bandits. The leader of the thieves then smiles and says no one would find it strange if someone passed away there. They threaten him to hand over everything without a fight, as it would be less trouble for everyone. The protagonist understands they are not common thieves and are willing to take lives. A memory of his training with the veteran knight flashes through his mind at that moment. He recalls the teachings about causality and how to create powerful attacks. These lessons would be very useful for the fight that was about to begin in the desert. With a confident smile, the young man says he'll use them as his first training targets. One of the bandits is confused by the young man's attitude and doesn't understand what he's saying. They start to laugh, and one of them says the boy is talking as if he were a mage. With his hand glowing, the hero prepares to show his power to the bandits. He then creates a tornado of wind that throws all the thieves far away with great force. The young man thinks that shaping the wind with his hand uses much less mana than creating it from scratch. Fallen on the ground, the bandits wonder what happened, and the young man is surprised by his own power. Without wasting time, he takes his water and prepares a new spell against the enemies. With that, the liquid transforms into a sharp ice spear floating in the desert air. The protagonist creates several ice projectiles and prepares to attack the thieves. One of the bandits is completely terrified by the mage's display of power. At that, the ice spears fly and go through one of the enemies, who falls to the ground, defeated. He thinks the spell should be more useful near water, and that throwing rocks is still stronger. The leader of the thieves kneels and begs for forgiveness, as he didn't know he was a mage. Desperate, the other bandits offer everything they have for the young man to spare their lives. But the protagonist just stomps firmly on the ground, showing he won't accept any excuses. He then uses his magic to create stone pillars that advance toward the enemies. With a look of pure terror, the bandit chief can't believe what he's seeing. The result is brutal, and all the thieves end up defeated by the young mage's power. The hero approaches the leader, and the man promises to answer whatever he wants to survive. He then asks why they attacked him without a plan, since he could have been a mage. The young man is confused because the bandit's answer was that it all happened because he bowed. The leader explains that since the young man was polite, they thought he was just an ordinary person. The young man gives thanks, as he has just learned a very useful lesson from that bandit. With that, The leader is filled with hope and asks if the young man will really spare his life. But a drop of water floats above his head, and he remembers the protagonist's name. A memory of the night begins, and he says the shepherd will meet many people. The man then advises him to never have pity on bandits who harm others. The protagonist thinks that now he understands the reason behind that firm advice. He realizes that sparing one life out of pity could end up harming 10 innocent people. With a serious look, the hero concludes that he's delayed long enough and needs to act now. Following the cart tracks in the sand, the young man continues on his way through the desert. As he walks, a strong and clear thought arises in his mind for the first time. He stares at his tracks and realizes that he has just taken the lives of other people. The young man feels guilt, but couldn't let them go because of his mentor's warning. He knew that people who steal without hesitation would attack others again in the future. Remembering the teachings, his confused heart finally calms, and he moves on. After a long journey, the hero finally arrives in a new world full of life. The young man is impressed by the scenery and can hardly believe what he sees. On the horizon, he spots a large city with a huge castle at the center of it all. The sign reveals that he has arrived in the small city of Mirai, a bustling place. The protagonist is impressed, as he has never seen so many people gathered in one place. Even the architecture of the buildings is completely different from the village where he grew up. Walking through the bustling market, the hero finally feels like he has arrived in a big, vibrant city. With that, the young man approaches a fruit stand, and the vendor greets him with great enthusiasm. But the merchant asks what he'd like to buy, and the shepherd replies that he's not a customer at the moment. At that instant, he remembers the veteran's advice to look for an inn as soon as he arrived. However, the vendor's mood changes, and he tells the young man to leave if he's not going to buy anything right then. The hero is confused by the rudeness and wonders if there's a secret rule about buying before asking. So, the protagonist decides to point to some apples and asks for the price of those red fruits. The man replies that the price is 2 ducat and observes the young foreigner with great curiosity. With that, the young man starts counting his coins, and the vendor says he accepts other types of payment as well. After making the purchase, the hero asks for the location of the inn and receives directions to follow the path. Following the tips, he arrives in front of the largest establishment in the area, which serves as both a bar and a dormitory. As soon as he enters the place, a young employee named Lena greets him with a very friendly smile. The girl compliments the young man's appearance, while the new customer asks for the price to spend the night there. She replies that the daily rate is 16 ducat, and the hero agrees to stay without a second thought. At this, the traveler hands over the bag of money, but says there's something very important he'd like to ask. The attendant holds the payment and seems very interested in what the young man wants to know from her now. The shepherd then asks if there are any monsters nearby that have a cash reward on their head. He reflects that he needs to hunt these creatures to absorb mana and also to collect more coins. With that, the girl falls silent, looking at the gold, and the protagonist asks why she isn't answering. Then Lena states that nothing is free in this world and mentions the city hall, leaving the young man confused. The attendant is surprised and calls him a country bumpkin for not knowing what the city hall is. She explains that public matters are handled there, and that the employees work for the local lord. With that, the girl informs him that the place is probably already closed, and that he should go there early tomorrow. Lena then asks if he's also a monster hunter, but the young man doesn't understand the term. She tells the legend that normal people become mages by hunting, and asks if that's his goal. The hero touches his hand and questions if that's just a silly superstition of the local people. Suddenly, a strong man interrupts and says that it's a fact, and that he saw it with his own eyes. The employee is shocked to see the man named Midden, and he shouts that he won't pass on until he becomes a mage. Then the monster hunter gives the young man a pat on the head and apologizes for the intrusion, but the protagonist is interested and asks the man to tell him more about the story of becoming a mage by hunting. Bored, the girl explains that if mages get strong by hunting, then normal people would become mages the same way. At this, Madan reveals that he and his group are hunting monsters precisely to become powerful mages. The young man asks if anyone in the group has become a mage yet, and he replies that there are only 4 of them in the city. The man then notices the young man's clothes and questions if he actually has a weapon for hunting. With that, the hero shows his slingshot, and the hunter notices it has been used a lot in battles. The veteran analyzes the weapon and says that with it, one could hunt small monsters like rabbits and foxes. Then he reveals that his group was in need of another marksman, and invites him to join them. The protagonist just gives a faint, mysterious smile at the monster hunter's unexpected invitation. But he declines the offer and later is shown lying in his room to rest for a bit. Looking at the ceiling, the young man reflects on how that day was full of unexpected events. The young man looks at his backpack and still can't believe he really left his village behind. He wonders what will happen from now on, and his hand glows with blue mana. Suddenly, the young man hears 2 knocks coming from his room door at the inn. Sitting on the bed, he becomes alert and asks aloud who is knocking at the door. At that moment, a memory of the veteran appears, telling him not to let his guard down even in an inn. The swordsman had warned him that a city is not an automatically safe place for everyone. With that, the hero remembers the lesson to never let his guard down, and that he had gotten the message loud and clear. Back in the present, the young man prepares his mana and approaches the door to open it carefully. Then he opens a small crack in the door to peek at who is on the other side without being seen. His eyes show all his concentration and caution as he verifies the visitor's identity. To his surprise, it's just Lena, the attendant, who asks with a smile if he was already sleeping. The hero is confused, and she says she came to warm him up because she thought the room was cold. The young man asks what she means by that, and the girl looks at him with a suggestive gaze. She says it's exactly what it sounds like and stands at the door with a shy expression. With that, the young woman offers her company for a bit of money, but he asks what happens if he doesn't want to. The girl then gets closer and says he shouldn't lie because his face gives it all away, but the protagonist just closes his eyes and makes the face of a monk who has reached enlightenment. The attendant is left completely shocked and speechless by the young man's unexpected attitude. Another memory of the older mage appears, where he desperately shouts not to do that. The swordsman had warned him to be careful, because many girls of that type can carry illnesses. Back in the past, the young man remembers his mentor warning him not to get carried away by desire. With that, the girl leaves in a huff, and the hero thinks that life in the city isn't easy either. Lying down, he reflects that first the fruit shop and now Lena, the cities are quite cold. Meanwhile, one of the monster hunters approaches his boss to ask a question. He asks why the leader wanted to bring the newcomer along since he didn't seem like much help. Maidon replies that the young man's arrogant attitude would make him perfect monster bait. But in truth, the boy reminded him of his youth, and he was worried about his weapon. The hunter thought that if the rookie stayed close to him, he might be able to survive a little longer. The protagonist then cracks a slight smile on his bed as he listens to the conversation through the wall. He realizes that maybe the city isn't as cold and heartless a place as he had imagined. The next day, the young man goes to the great city hall to finally begin his journey. Inside, an employee greets him politely and asks how he can help him today. The hero asks if he's an official, and the man questions what else he would look like. Then the young man gets straight to the point and says he came to hunt monsters, leaving the official surprised. At that moment, the shepherd remembers the veteran, saying the world wouldn't be kind to him. The mage explained that there's no reason for the world to be good, and that the method to be treated well is simple. His mentor advised him to reveal that he was a mage, and thus the common people would respect him. Back in the present, the employee hands the young man a paper with the monster hunt request. He warns that the young man can't take the poster, so he should look at it and then return it. Seeing the drawing, the hero asks if it's a crow, and the man teases him, asking if it looks like a cat. The employee warns him to bring the monster's body, because if the mana isn't dispersed, it becomes a phantom. The protagonist says he already knows, and that abandoning a magical beast's body carries a death penalty. With that, he remembers what happened before and states that he won't repeat the same mistake. Then the young man asks if the knights don't hunt, and the man says they don't have time. He explains that a knight's job is to maintain order in the city, not to hunt outside it. With disdain, the official says that this kind of work is for outlaws like the young man, who then leaves. Watching the young man leave, the man thinks that another body will pile up outside. At that moment, the crow monster's eye opens with an intense and sinister light, but the creature is already shown defeated on the hall floor with a large wound in its chest. The employees look down, completely shocked and unable to believe what happened. Everyone is impressed because the hero returned with the monster's body very quickly. The young man then confirms that he managed to defeat the creature all by himself. He asks how he can receive the reward, and the official stammers that they will pay. With that, the man hands over a bag of coins and tells the young man to go get some rest. Meanwhile, the others analyze the body and are impressed that the wings are intact. One of the officials then notices that the protagonist hasn't left yet and is still standing there. The man at the reception asks why he's still in the hall and hasn't gone to the inn. The hero then questions if there are any other monsters worth hunting in the area. Shocked by the question, the employee can't believe the young man can still hunt more. The scene then cuts and shows the most expensive dishes from the inn's menu on the table. Lena serves a feast and says she never dreamed someone like him would defeat 30 monsters in 3 days. She comments that he must have made a lot of money, and the young hero happily enjoys the food. But the young man responds seriously that money is not his only goal on this journey. He explains that his goal is the monster's mana, and thanks to that, he has become much stronger. The protagonist notices that his mana has increased several times since he met the veteran swordsman. However, he feels a limit and thinks it will be difficult to evolve with just the mana of weak creatures. The inn attendant is confused by what the young man just said to her. With that, the owner and the girl look at the empty table and are surprised that he ate everything by himself. The man says that despite being thin, the young man eats a lot, and Lena is happy that he enjoyed it. The hero thanks them and says it was delicious, but as he's about to leave, someone stops him. A strong man grabs the protagonist's clothes from behind to get his attention. With that, a group of bullies confronts him and asks if he's eating something tasty all by himself. One of them calls him a beanpole and says he heard the young man has been making a lot of money. Then the brute suggests he give some charity to his partners and tries to slap him. But the protagonist easily blocks the blow, leaving the attacker completely shocked. With a calm look, the hero ironically asks if the man didn't want a little charity. The bully gets angry and tells him not to get cocky as he prepares a full force punch. The young man dodges and lands a powerful blow that sends the enemy flying with great force. Without wasting time, the other goon grabs a wooden bench and charges to attack the hero. But the young man stops the attack with one hand and shatters the bench into pieces instantly. With a strong grip, the protagonist twists the other attacker's cheek with great ease, and with a glow in his hand, the young mage finishes off the goon, who falls defeated to the floor. Lena, the attendant, appears with a forced smile, asking them to stop the commotion. She then yells with all her might that they can't fight inside the inn. Later, the group of bullies is shown bowing and offering sincere apologies for the fight. Back in the hero's room, Midden states that he gave the two a talking to and that it won't happen again. He explains that they had been short on money lately and got jealous seeing the young man. With that, the two goons stammer an apology for having caused the trouble. The young man then asks if things are tough, and the hunter says they are limited. Madan clenches his fist and says that in about 3 days he'll be able to pay for the room, but it's his problem. Then the protagonist holds out a bag of coins to the monster hunter with a smile. The man is surprised, and the hero explains that it's a payment for his kindness in inviting him. Madan asks how he knew, and the young man says that nothing is free in this world. He then asks for information in return, and the hunter is happy, saying that's his specialty. The scene cuts, showing a general view of the city of Murai with its various buildings. The hero prepares on a cliff, thinking this might be his last hunt in the city. He reflects that Midden gave him information about the next city, and that it's time to head there. The young man remembers that the information was useful, and that Madan is a really good person. He compares him to Kjorn and concludes that although less experienced, Madan is purer and kinder. Suddenly, the protagonist's eyes widen in surprise at something he saw. With his keen sense of smell, the protagonist detects a familiar and very worrying scent in the air. Hoping his guess is wrong, he runs at high speed through the forest. At that moment, the young man finds huge claw marks on a tree, indicating a fight. With a serious expression, the hero continues to follow the trail of destruction through the woods. Suddenly, he comes across a terrible scene upon finding someone gravely injured. The young man recognizes the man and remembers that he is part of Madan's group of hunters. With a cold gaze, the mage analyzes the situation, trying to understand what happened there. The injured hunter's eye is lifeless, showing that he did not survive his injuries. Beside him, some coins are scattered on the bright red, stained ground. Crouching down, the protagonist wonders what on earth happened to Maidan and his group. Suddenly, he hears a sound and finds another member of the team still alive behind a tree. With his last bit of strength, the man manages to say the word rabbit, leaving the young man confused. A frightening image of a rabbit with a bloody mouth suddenly appears in the scene. Looking around, he sees several bodies and realizes they were all victims of a monster. Then a creature that looks like a giant rabbit with red eyes and horns appears. The protagonist quickly turns, preparing to face the killer beast. Without warning, the monster charges at high speed toward the young mage to attack. The young man is surprised by the creature's speed and can barely react to the attack. The hero manages to dodge just in time, and the rabbit stops for a moment, staring at him with hatred. With that, he concentrates his mana and creates an air barrier to defend against the next attack. With a quick movement of his fingers, the protagonist prepares to launch an air attack. Then he fires a powerful blade of wind toward the monstrous creature. The attack hits the rabbit, but it manages to defend itself in an unexpected way. The creature uses its tail like a whip and shatters the air barrier into pieces. The hero then realizes that the monster is used to defending against throwing weapons. With a heavy stomp, the rabbit charges again to try and crush the young mage. The beast leaps high into the air and dives with all its might toward the protagonist for a final attack. With its eye glowing intensely, the creature focuses entirely on its target down below, but the young man manages to dodge in time, and the monster only hits the ground with its attack. Without wasting time, the creature runs at high speed to continue its pursuit. The hero gets close and lands a direct mana blow to the giant rabbit's face. With the impact, the creature screams in pain, and the protagonist seizes the chance to back away. He then jumps back to gain some distance and think about his next move. At that moment, the monster begins to glow with a golden energy all over its body. Then the creature charges again, but now with even more impressive speed. With a swift movement, the rabbit uses its speed to create several afterimages of itself. It continues to move in a zigzag pattern to confuse the young man and make it difficult for him to aim. The battle kicks up a dust cloud, so large you can barely see what's happening. Inside the smoke, the monster screams furiously as it destroys several trees around it. The scene reveals that the creature is injured and bleeding a little from its paw and back. With a bloody mouth, the monstrous rabbit finally falls to the ground, defeated by the young man. With the battle over, the protagonist stands firm in the clearing, preparing for the next step. He then approaches the creature's body to finally absorb all of its mana. Without wasting time, the hero extends his hand to begin the process of power absorption. With that, a large amount of green energy begins to flow into the young man. He realizes the absorbed mana is much greater than that of the leopard monster from before. With this, the young man can hardly believe the absurd amount of power he is receiving. At that moment, the surviving hunter calls him a mage, leaving the young man surprised. The hero confirms, and the man asks why he was hiding his true identity. With tears in his eyes, the hunter reveals that none of them had family to leave their belongings to. He then remembers his boss, Madan, and the dream they all shared together. A memory begins, and Madan talks about a city called Orem that has a library. He explains with a smile that the place has thousands of books for everyone to read. Madan then notices that the young man has finally shown interest in something he said. The young man asks how to get in, but the hunter says not just anyone can go there. Then he reveals that only mages are allowed in the library, leaving the hero deep in thought. Back in the present, the hunter asks what he means by, "I've decided." The hero states that he is going to the great city of Orem that Madan talked so much about. Looking at the graves, he bids farewell to his hunter friend with a sad gaze. Finally, he turns and walks away, wishing for Madan to be happy wherever he is. After a long journey, the young man finally arrives in a city full of life and people. With this, he even feels embarrassed for having been impressed by the small city of Murai. The sign reveals that he has arrived in the great city of Orem, a huge and bustling place. He never imagined so many people would be trying to get in and joins the long line at the gate. Seeing the guards at the entrance, the hero wonders if they are looking for criminals. As expected of a large city, it has a much more established and secure system. But suddenly, one of the guards yells for him to stop, and the young man is confused by the order. With a disgusted look, the man points to the young man and says his entry is not allowed. The guard complains that he's never seen such dirty clothes and tells him to go clean up before entering. Once inside the city, he finally spots the great library, a huge and imposing tower. Looking up at the top of the building, he remembers that this was the place Midden talked so much about. The hero is impressed by the structure and wonders if it was made with magic. With that, he approaches the door and catches the attention of the two guards watching the entrance. The young man says he wants to enter, but one of the men warns that the library is only for mages. Without hesitation, the protagonist reveals that he is a mage, and the guard stares at him, completely shocked. The man gets angry and asks, if he wants to get taken out for pretending to be a mage in front of him. He says there's no way someone like the young man could be a mage and tries to push him away. But the protagonist's hand glows with red mana, and the guard is left stunned. A memory of the veteran appears, and he says that mages can easily recognize each other. He explains that by sensing mana, they even know if the other mage is stronger than them. The protagonist's eye glows with an intense and very frightening red mana. With that, the guard is thrown back by the overwhelming pressure of the young man's energy. Fallen on the ground, the man says he's okay as his colleague quickly helps him up. He then realizes that the young man is not an ordinary mage, but someone of the noble class or higher. With that, he introduces himself as a knight of the Baltus house and asks which family the young man is from. The hero then questions if he needs to say in order to enter, and the guard replies that it's not necessary, but he warns that to use the library, one needs permission from the master of Baltus. The knight says he will contact the noble house, and the young man ends up sighing in a luxurious bath. The young man then reflects that he thought the process to get in would be much simpler than this. At that moment, a maid appears, observing the young man with a very shy expression on her face. Then the maids begin to attend to the young man, who doesn't seem to like the situation very much. He wonders how things ended up like this, with 3 young women helping him in the bath. Awkwardly, the hero tells them to stop, and the maids reply yes. At the same time, one of them explains that if they fail to attend to an important guest, they will be punished. At this, he tells them to do as they please, and the girls thank him, very relieved. After the bath, one of the maids is completely impressed by the young man's beauty. She then covers her mouth with her hand, realizing she had overreacted. Now in new clothes, the hero asks if there's something on his face for her to react like that. The girl apologizes and says she got lost for a moment because of the noble guest's beauty. With a smile, he says there's nothing to forgive, but asks them not to speak so informally. The hero is impressed upon seeing himself in the mirror and can hardly believe what he's seeing. At that moment, a young woman with red hair enters the room and stares at him with great curiosity. The girl then teases him, asking if he is the guest who showed up looking like a beggar. With a smile, she says that after a bath and new clothes, he now looks like a prince. The young man introduces himself as Turan, and the girl reveals her name is Azella, the noble of the house. Then she asks which family he belongs to, but the young man says he cannot reveal that. With a mysterious smile, the noblewoman says it's a shame he won't tell her his origin. At this, she thinks that since he's hiding who he is, maybe it's time for a little game. Suddenly, a huge explosion of orange mana envelops the entire hall, surprising the young man. With a challenging look, the red-haired girl shouts for him to show his power. She demands to see the young man's mana, who is shocked by the immense pressure of the noblewoman's energy.